What have you given up?
All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming and turning out tonight. We've got a pretty exciting event coming up in the next hour and a half. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Beam and Megan, our two senior interns, to give us a little intro about what we're about to do tonight and hear from our panelists.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I'm a 24+1, and I'm a sustainable Dartmouth. And I'm Beam. I'm a 25. I'm also a sustainable Dartmouth. Yeah, thank you for coming. We're also pretty excited. And so just to give you an overview of how today's going to work. So the first half is going to be a panel with our two lovely guests, and we have some prepared questions, and we'll open up to you guys at the end for any questions you guys might have. And the second half will be the CFI Climate Futures Initiative workshop, which will be led by Ben, this Climate Futures Initiative intern, and Rachel, our sustainability. So first off, what is the Dartmouth Climate Collaborative?
You're asking us or them?
Ben, I just want to, like, what do people think it is?
Yeah, I can start off with something. The climate collaborative, from my understanding, is Dartmouth's overarching effort to decarbonize the campus, and beyond that, also look at how else Dartmouth can take climate action in various spheres. And I know that Professor Ogden has been working on getting lots of feedback from around campus and specifically focusing on faculty, from my understanding. So I'll start there, but feel free to add on.
We can go, you guys got this.
Yeah, that's basically it. Our official answer is the Dartmouth Climate Collaborative launched last spring will connect, strengthen, and leverage Dartmouth's existing work on climate and sustainability. Instead of reinventing the wheel, the collaborative aims to serve as a connective tissue among a number of pre-existing efforts, from sustainable campus operations to academics, experiential learning, and campus as well. Part of the initial announcement of the collaborative was Dartmouth's $500 million commitment to decarbonizing our campus. The Climate Futures Initiative, the academic arm of the Climate Collaborative, is a one-year planning process which aims to map out a vision for climate scholarship and engagement at Dartmouth, which Laura leads. So, as we have that little overview, why don't we go through and introduce yourself and what you do with the Dartmouth Climate Collaborative.
Sure. I'm Rosi. I'm the Director of Sustainability, and I think part of my role over the last 14 years, which is kind of crazy, has been to try to connect these dots. So I think my role in the collaborative is to amplify that, right? Is to try to do a good job of listening, do a good job of connecting what's happening on the operational side with what's happening in academics, but also what's happening in your experience as you move through Dartmouth, and making sure that we're recognizing Dartmouth's potential for distinction. The places, what I think about a lot is how can I personally, and how can we as a Dartmouth community contribute to solving climate change, and what is our distinctive toolkit to do that? So I think that's my role.
I'm Laura Ogden, and I'm a professor in the anthropology department. I work on environmental issues, environmental change issues, and conservation issues, generally speaking. I've worked for a long time in the United States in the Florida Everglades, and then for the last 10 or 15 years, I've actually been working in southernmost Chile, primarily with indigenous communities around climate change issues, maybe more environmental change more broadly. But this year I've been working in the Provost office, helping to identify what Dartmouth's strengths are around climate change research and teaching, and help develop a plan to kind of amplify those efforts to help sort of put Dartmouth on the map around being, say, the green ID.
We're both co-chairs of the advisory council.
Yes, we are. And also, I'm wearing the exact same dress that I had on in the poster. That picture was taken a year ago, so that actually means that now it's like the cycle of seasonally.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Keniston. I'm the Senior Vice President for Capital Planning and Campus Operations. So I lead a number of teams on campus responsible for making things happen, whether it's facilities or construction, dining. And I'm part of President Bylock's senior team, and I have responsibility for a couple of her key initiatives. The work we're trying to do to expand access and affordability on childcare, the work we're doing to expand and improve the quality of our housing, and then this effort around our climate and sustainability initiatives. And I think, you know, Laura was just talking about kind of the green as being part of the Dartmouth identity. I think part of what we've been talking about as this group, but also the senior team, is we haven't really owned that. We've often kind of talked about that as a concept, but when you really looked at it, we were in the bottom quartile of the Ivy Plus peers that we look at in terms of just what our aspirations were, never mind what we're actually doing. So the announcement of the $500 million investment on decarbonizing moves us, at least from an aspiration perspective, to the top quarter. And I think our job is to really make sure that we deliver on that in the next 5 years.
Awesome, thank you. And then could maybe one of you kind of give a progress update on what's kind of happened since the last panel in back in the spring?
I mean, I can share some numbers. So the $500 million commitment is kind of a broad commitment. We then have a process we have to go through to actually tie that to specific projects. As of this moment, we have had the board has approved close to $200 million worth of projects. And we've started executing on about $25 million worth of projects. So if you were on campus this summer, you felt it really acutely. It's still happening this fall, but a lot of the projects you're seeing, particularly on the East Wheelock and then the athletics district, are about getting us ready to go on the decarbonizing front. So things are ramping up quickly. We're moving from the planning and design phase on the decarbonizing side to actually starting to do energy efficiency measures in our buildings and install the more efficient hot water system that will be the backbone of our future heating and cooling system.
Can I come on that? Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, so I've been at Dartmouth for a long time, and I've seen a lot of generations of students working on climate action and activating around getting Dartmouth to be bolder and to step up operationally and in lots of other ways, including in our curriculum and in our endowment and across the board. And I think from my perspective, we kind of hit this, we crested the hill of decision action. And I think the process of organizational change is difficult and slow and about momentum. And for a long time, it felt like we were pushing, or whatever, hauling a wagon uphill. And all of a sudden I had the sensation of like, oh no, we're going downhill and I might get run over, right? We've got like, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like we got approval to decarbonize our operation. We have to like go. And it's not that we didn't have a really clear plan of what that would look like. The $500 million number came from us asking for enough money to do a plan. But it's for me, it's really exciting. It feels like a really different sensation, and at least in the area of operational decarbonization. So that feels like really different.
Yeah, I mean, right to the point of the next question I was kind of gonna ask you. So change on an institutional level is really hard to bring to reality. So could you talk a little bit more about the process of what brought us to the point of announcing this climate investment in these initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think organizational change is challenging, is slow, is in some ways like unexpected and jerky. Like if you can, for example, activate for change for a long time and it seems like nothing is happening, and then all of a sudden there's a big change. Like that's how
Something tips it.
Something tips it, and I think big organizations like Dartmouth and traditional organizations like Dartmouth, or I mean. Dartmouth, I don't know how much you've thought about Dartmouth's decision structure, but it's a very strange organizational model with a dispersed governance, which is very different. I came from the private sector before this, where like a CEO would make a decision or the head of a nonprofit would make a decision. And that would be the thing we did, and it took not very much time, and this is not that. So I think it was a process of many generations of students, many people across the organization have always been people who are working on sustainability at Dartmouth from the beginning to now. We had one of the best and early environmental studies program, a lot of the ancestors of what is now sustainability in systems thinking and environmental science started at Dartmouth, the School of Rome, et cetera. School of Rome. So, I mean, from my perspective, this is an example of like lots of seeds planted over a lot of time, starting to kind of emerge out of the ground. That's how I kind of view it.
Awesome. And as a follow-up to that, you mentioned that a lot of the students had a big role in helping to accelerate this. So what do you see now as the roles that students could continue to play to help ensure that this momentum continues?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of roles. I think that depends a little bit on who you are and how you like to engage and like what excites you. But I think part of the opportunity is for you to engage in this process. That there's going to be a lot of interesting projects, whether you're like into engineering or you're into organizational change or you're into human decision making or you're whatever you're into. I think there's a lot of really interesting projects. I think part of what I love about working with students is you guys hold us accountable. Like you guys are passionate and you're passionate about things that are really important. And so I love the idea of continuing the conversation about how we Dartmouth should be held accountable, how we want to change this institution as stakeholders in it going forward, right? Like I used to be in your shoes, now I'm in these shoes. One day you guys are going to be in these shoes and there's going to be a generation of students pushing you, whether you work at Dartmouth or somewhere else in some other part of the world.
Can I give my favorite example of like how we truly like benefit from the work that students do? There was a class 3 or 4 years ago, the Engines 8990 course, that we had shared some of our data that we collect on our buildings. It was basically energy modeling, and that class took it on as a project and developed this whole model. It was super cool, had these like sliders in it. Like I was impressed as just like a Excel geek, what they were able to put together. But that tool changed how we were prioritizing projects around energy efficiency. So until that project happened, we were very focused on what do we do at the source, right? So how do we replace number 6 fuel oil and our kind of combustion steam plant? What that project did for us was basically say, you're gonna have to deal with that. But in terms of bang for your buck, investing in energy efficiency is the best thing that you can do. You literally, in terms of the amount of CO2 reduction you get for $1 invested, you get so much more. And what was scary about that was that's a much bigger project, right? To go around and touch every building around campus. And so we really had to have the data to do that. And that was ultimately a student project that provided us that data to make that decision. So when we say that like the students help shape where we're going, like that's not just a platitude. Like we have some really tangible examples where people have helped guide us in that direction. And I'll just add that, I think one of the nice things about the Campus Climate Collaborative, where we're not just thinking about the decarbonization, but thinking about this more broadly, one of our challenges is beyond just the technical, how are we solving for this? How do we get people to care about this? How do we get people to advocate for this? And so I think there's a real place in terms of arts and humanities. How are we writing? How are we communicating? How are we bringing performances that get people to feel and care about this as a topic? Because at the end of the day, it's all about priorities. And the more people that care about this as a top priority, the easier it is for us to get things done. And so I think there's a really broad spectrum from like the super technical to the like inspiring change that can be super, super impactful.
As a follow-up to that, was the Engines 8990 like energy panel part of the greenhouse, or was that?
That was
Yeah, it was pre-Montgomery House separate thing.
Okay,
But that was also a cool project.
yeah.
That was an energy audit of one building on Dartmouth campus.
The next question is directed at Josh. So $500 million is a lot of money. It's the largest investment in sustainability in Dartmouth's history. There's always decisions to be made about how they're allocating spending. So how was this decision to make this investment forward and how was this process to finalize?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, we didn't have a do nothing scenario. Much of our heating infrastructure on campus is over 50 years old. And we had steam lines that were failing and needing to be replaced in an emergency setting. And so part of it was a very financial case, basically saying, look, it's actually more expensive for us to do these emergency repairs than to get ahead of it. And if we're going to get ahead of it and actually start replacing this infrastructure that's aging and falling apart, why don't we also replace it with something that is more energy efficient and allows us to use non-combustion zero carbon technology? So we estimate that we're paying probably about a 20% premium. You know, here's as an example, we have steam lines that run all over campus. We're replacing those with low temperature hot water piping. That change is probably about 20% more expensive than if we were to just put new steam lines in. But we think it's worth it, and that's where the prioritization of the call to action that we heard from students, from alums, from the science that we were seeing in terms of needing to make an impact, that justified that 20% premium to say, you know what, we really need to do this because we have a responsibility as an institution that produces the science that shows us what we need to do to actually follow through on that as well. And so that was kind of all of that came together to ultimately get to the point where we could fund that.
It seems like too, like, well, the reason that 20% extra becomes a priority is that it's an academic priority here too. Like our students really care about climate change scholarship, care about learning and thinking about the world and being a part of the world in a different way. And this gives lots of space for students to get involved and professors to get involved in all kinds of really cool research that is enabled by this decarbonization. And we're using this term campus in this lab to sort of talk about those opportunities, but I mean, that 20% is like a real, hardly anything when you think about like what it opens up. Dollars. It's way more money than I've ever seen, even the 20%.
And you mentioned the campuses lab, so would you mind giving us an overview of the Climate Futures Initiative and speaking structure with faculty, with students, and what campuses lab means to you and your course?
Sure. And we'll be talking about that after this panel a little bit more in a more informal way, because I'm really excited about getting student input about that, because it has been primarily focused on faculty. So the Climate Futures Initiative is just this term we're using for a one-year planning effort to try to understand what kind of research and other kinds of scholarship is happening at Dartmouth right now that we're doing well around climate studies, climate change, environmental change, and sustainability, and as well as what kinds of teaching is happening. And so I've spent the last 6 months or so with Rachel really doing a deep survey and having really long discussions with faculty and staff about that, what they're already doing and what their aspirations are and what they're hearing from students. So I'm talking about 150 faculty and staff at this point. And I have a sense of that. But then part of that enthusiasm, and what I would say is like, you're not surprised by this, but literally people are teaching about climate change and sustainability in almost every department on campus. And there's a few exceptions, and these are kind of notable exceptions because they're actually some of our bigger majors. And so this is this gap. It's interesting, it's something we should talk more about. But so it's like an invisible curriculum on campus, but we don't really have a way to knit it together. Like if somebody wanted to be a climate change major, we don't have that. We also don't have a way of like revealing this like amazing research system, or find ways for students to tap into that. So the Climate Futures Initiative is really a way of sort of uncovering that and figuring out ways to make that more accessible to everyone. And part of that is this term, and Rosi's been using this term, and other people have been using this term for a long time, that's called campus as lab. And a question that the provost asked me really early on was like, we have all this forest land that Dartmouth has had forever, including the Second College Grant. Has anyone been up there before, the Second College Grant? What's it like?
It's beautiful.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What is it, what was it about it that you instructed?
I think, well, one that students have access to. I spent a few weekends in Dartmouth. I was up there for first year trips this year.
You were?
Yeah.
A lot of people go there for first year
Yeah.
trips. Well, you know, we have this land that students visit and use it for first year trips. It's really beloved in lots of ways. It's hard to get to, and yet it's such a gift. It's such a jewel for the Dartmouth and really. So this question is like, how can that be a place where we can help faculty do more research there? How can we be a place where we have more formal teaching out there? Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a 2-week mentoring class out there? How do we figure that out? The purpose is or summer on. I can't say that in summer on though.
I'm trying to social.
I know. I'm like a southerner, so I can barely say any word and like summer. Anyway, so how do we use places like that, the organic farm, which is already like such an amazing spot for so many people's experiential and just respite. But could this also be a place for more formal curriculum teaching, as well as the decarbonization effort? You know, like we're really putting these holes in the ground that go back to like the edge of time. I say those again. But like, what is that, what an opportunity, you could literally look into a hole that goes to the strata of the earth that's like 400 years or so. It's not like more than just your headlamp for camping, like something a little more technical. But yeah, what we're doing these and could be used as a way for our teaching.
So a follow-up, I noticed in the Dartmouth news that there are some climate-related courses that are popping up. Can you speak to the CFI, the Climate Futures Initiative pilot projects and like the community partnerships for climate resilience with Professor Renshaw and Lester?
So the provost provided some money for some pilot projects, and the first pilot project that we funded was a really cool course, and I think it's going to go online kind of an experimental way in the fall. That Carl Renshaw and Professor from Earth Sciences. But it's a course. It's going to be a 2-term course, sort of a senior capstone-ish 2-term course, but where students will be partnered with community organizations who really need expertise helping think through climate resiliency, like things like flooding stuff. And so like a 2-term partnership where students will learn how to actually engage in community organizations in a real way. Like I was thinking, like my little town in Vermont, there's a series of the same little town. It literally, the only kidding place we have is the road kid. And like one person in office, 1.5 people in one office. So really no paid technical expertise. And we got filled with the floods in Vermont 2 centers. I mean, literally, bridges went out, etc. Wouldn't it be amazing to have some Dartmouth students help our town come up with like even a map of climate vulnerability? It would be a game changer. And so this project will enable those kind of connections to happen. And we will give a little seed funding to communities so they can enact whatever recommendations that the students and communities come up with.
It's kind of like the senior design challenge.
Yes, it is. It's modeled on that, but with a little bit of seed funding for communities.
And this question is open to all girls. What is the greatest challenge in your work and what gives the greatest?
Well, from my perspective, the greatest challenge is the amount of construction that we need to manage. We are just starting, and I think we want to be really thoughtful about, obviously we have aggressive goals around decarbonization, so we want to move quickly, but we also want to do it in a way that doesn't totally disrupt the Dartmouth College experience. So that's one of the challenges. I'll think that's also one of the things that's giving me the most hope is to actually see things going in the ground and see the progress that we're making. It's really, really exciting. And I think I just add one more piece, which is to, as an institution, see us adopt a set of goals that I think are really moving us into a leadership position. And the one that I think about when I talk about this are our carbon reduction goals. So 60% by 2030, 100% by 2050. I think when you layer on top of that, the fact that we're solving for this in a cold climate where it's much more challenging to do, when you layer on top of it that we're going to do it in partnership with our faculty and students and actually use those as learning and research opportunities. We haven't executed on it yet, so we got to prove that we can do it. But I think that aspiration is one that would truly make us a leader in this space, which I think is what people have been calling for a long time. So we're not there yet, but I think we've at least now set our goals and our aspirations in the right.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, we just like lately, so I'm from Florida, I'm from Florida, and this storm that we just had this Halloween, it's really scared the heck out of me. In that I'm like a person who grew up on hurricanes and down hurricanes. I lived through my parents' house was destroyed in Hurricane Andrew. Like I've been in the depths of that. But this hurricane happened so fast. That storm so fast, and it's the devastation that happened in North Carolina and Western North Carolina and Tennessee. These places where I feel like we don't even know how to actually talk about risk in that way. So it's my feeling the challenge is actually just kind of staying in the trouble of what climate change is doing, and still finding a way to be a person that's building community in ways that are helpful and hopeful for a future. I mean, that's the hard way.
Yeah. I think, like, personally, my challenge is similar. It's that climate change is, big and scary, and I read the paper every morning. It's not just climate change. There's a lot going on that's really hard. And I think that, I don't know if everyone here is from places like you are that hit by lean, but it's really hard to carry that around. I think organizationally, the biggest challenge is Dartmouth is like a big, cumbersome organization, and we're trying to change things, and that's like jerky and painful, and we don't always communicate effectively. I had a situation today where I was like, wow, I just didn't do a good job communicating effectively. And I think when we think about organizations, we think about them as these like things, right? But like we are humans inside this organization trying to do the best we can every day. So that is always, I'm always like, gosh, I need more than we do. I think we're particularly communicating across the organization. There's a lot of things that give me hope, really get me really fired up. I think one of those is the good people that are trying really hard to do all this stuff. And I think it's particularly notable, I was thinking about this during this panel, that Dartmouth and organizations like Dartmouth for a long time kind of pretended that our operations didn't exist. That and we do this with people too, that the carpenters who fix something in your dorm room, or the plumbers who make the water work, or come when there's a clogged toilet, are not people that you necessarily have interacted with. And I think that for a long time that was by design, right? That was like almost it was a class division. And I think what I am starting to see is that division in some ways breaking down in ways that I think will have important consequences. So we're talking about putting our utilities in places we can see them and being accountable for our energy consumption here in a really different way than I think we thought about in the past. And that way of thinking, I think, if we keep pushing that way of thinking, that's a really different way of living. That's really different way of eating, it's a really different way of moving, it's a really different way of all of things. So that gets me really excited. And you guys get me really excited, not because I think it's up to me to solve climate change, because I don't think it's up to me to solve climate change. I really hate it when people get in rooms, they're like, well, I don't have to worry about climate change because all y'all are gonna solve it. That really irritates me. I think it is my job to work really hard on this every day. But you guys have a lot of awesome ideas. You're really passionate and you're pushing really hard. So that makes me really excited.
It feels like a really different moment in Dartmouth too, like the senior leadership, people like Josh, other senior leadership, they are really committed and they like, I'm like such a cynical person when it comes to this kind of thing. But I really believe right now in this moment that Dartmouth is actually quite committed to being a different place and not just funding its operations, but like really trying to hold itself accountable to its other obligations to the world. And that is extremely hopeful.
It's great spending all day with these college grant.
Well, that's an example of like, you know, Laura got a group of people to go to the second college grant who are people who might never have met each other. We work across operations and administration, academics and
Being with.
and perfect day, that was really nice. And also worth noting, and you know, I know this is something that's really centered in CFI. We don't go to the grant forever, right? There were people at the grant before Dartmouth owned it. And the grant was taken from Native people out of most of our land. And I think Dartmouth has an opportunity to recommit to doing better. And I think that really matters to me as well.
Thank you for sharing your hopes, and I guess what advice would you give to people who feel that they're approaching burnout or becoming increasingly more disengaged to things maybe they were previously passionate about due to growing desensitization and frequent like climate disasters and consuming the news and looking for
I would do things that were showing, okay, break. And do things that were showing. Yeah, off your phone and out into the woods,
Go
whatever the
to
thing
farm.
is. Come out to the farm, play in the grass, look at clouds. I mean, that sounds so tiny, but, and
That's what we all do.
that's what we all do. Practice mindfulness, take care of yourself, get enough sleep. And honestly, like, so some of you, none of you remember Jen Musco, but Jen Musco was working in her office and then she became a fellow and then she worked in the office, she worked with me for 8 years before she left and went to grad school, and now she's at the UPS, really one of the things work. But Jen and I talk about this a lot, and one of the things that she always said is like, what gets me up and doing this work every day is that if Earth were hit by a meteor tomorrow, I would still want to be doing this work today. And I think for me, that was like, that sounds really dooming and gloomy, but I actually find that really hopeful. Like, this is actually working on something I'm passionate about. I get to do it every day. Sometimes it's really tiring, and you take a break and walk my dog in the woods. And then I'm gonna get up and try again, right? And now it's gonna succeed. We're people, which means we make mistakes, and we're not always moving as fast as we'd like to move, and the institution isn't perfect, it's a long way from perfect, but we're like chipping away at it every day.
Let's open it up to your questions from the audience.
Yeah, so Dartmouth has divested from fossil fuels but remains invested in the military industrial complex. How do you hold those two things like together with this said commitment to the environment when in reality the military is one of the largest producers of emissions and we're still invested in that?
Yeah, so we have a process that we go through. You know, I think as Rosi mentioned, you know, Dartmouth is this really complex, unwieldy organization. And so, you know, I think it's, you know, what you're talking about are kind of judgments on particular issues. And while we can all carry those as individuals, it's a much more complex process to have an organization take those on. And so, you know, I think the divestment process goes through what's called ACER, it's the Advisory Committee on Investor Responsibility. And so that's the platform for this kind of unwieldy organization to tackle questions.
I think I also feel like there's a lot of things that are in conflict. Like, I participate in the petro-industrial complex every day, and I wish I didn't, but I do. And actually, so do we all, right? Because of how we consume. It's not to say that we can't do better. We can, we should keep striving for that. But I think Dartmouth has a lot of things are in conflict all the time. And it doesn't mean that we should stop working towards aligning, but I think that like the process of divestment from oil and gas took 14 years. So it takes a long time to change an organization.
Plastic, how do we like, so many levels of what fossil fuels are actually implicated in environments and worlds. Plastic is probably one of those too. I'd like to see it all along.
But I also use plastic every day.
Tupperware from a mom.
Question more for Josh, I guess. Could you talk about basically getting the labor to actually do all this construction here in New England? Labor seems to be a sort of like a sticking point with basically availability of workers. So has there been any ideas of perhaps either changing the like shifting the academic plan to somehow re-coordinate when students are not here, like have students here during the interim and have all the construction here for like a massive 5-week push in the summer when they can actually do things rather in the winter when everything's slowed down. So we talk about coordinating with contractors, local contractors,
I would
everything.
love if we could shut down campus for 5 years. I don't think that is on the table, but I understand the sentiment, and it would certainly make our jobs easier. 2 thoughts on that, because you're absolutely right. The labor market, I think, is really is a challenging and rate-limiting factor for us. 2 things that are, I think, ultimately helping us. One, by making that $500 million commitment, it enables us to plan out a little bit longer. And one of the challenges in the construction industry is there's lots of bopping around, right? Like oftentimes projects have starts and stops. If you are a plumber, you come and do your part, maybe you then wait for an electrician to do their part and then you come back. And so that can lead to kind of challenges in how you manage the workforce. By having a longer time horizon that we're planning, we can actually sequence things in a better way. And so we can work with subcontractors and say, hey, if you stick around with us, we can actually guarantee you work for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which provides stability in their lives and their business, and also helps with us from a planning perspective. So I think that longer planning horizon is helping us. The second piece that I'll note is that one of our funding sources that we're looking for is a federal bill called the Inflation Reduction Act. In that act is a lot of funding for projects like what we're trying to do. And built into that are requirements around apprenticeship, certain wage levels. And I think that, having Dartmouth follow those, but also the broader industry, I think could help attract and train more people. And so I think that having that in the mix is a huge plus to help solve that problem.
If you care about climate policy, it's worth investigating. If you don't already know about the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, it's definitely worth investigating. It's also worth educating yourself about the election, because I was on a call the other day where one of the people on the call was talking about the outcome of the election and the likelihood of whether the Inflation Reduction Act would stay in place or not. This election has really big impacts for climate, really big impacts. So if you care about climate, educate yourself and vote.
Thanks, Rosi. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, Rachel, go for it.
So like my question is more about like concrete action students. So how can a student take like an interest and idea, or not even that, or just like I want to be involved in this, into something concrete they can have an impact on, let's say like something about like their speaking issues, and that's not like strictly like in the entrance department.
Well, if you're participating in the workshop that's happening right after this, that is like a really concrete impact. Those findings are going straight into Laura's CFI report and going into
my brain.
I think that has a really big impact. And you can engage in classes, by taking classes that are engaging with campus decarbonization. You can engage by joining TDA if you're interested in energy technology or any other student group that's working on energy. You can advocate for an internship in our office. If you want, like, I want to do something and there's not an internship for me, start visualizing what that is and come to office hours and talk to us about it. We've done tons of creator internships. They've worked, it's great. So if that's the thing you wanna do, that's that.
And I just think, like, I would really like to learn a range of ways by which students would like to engage, right? And so like, knowing the range of what that looks like from an internship at the hub that's working on climate change, documentary filmmaking, or whatever, to actually like being focused more on decarbonization, then that can help us imagine what those mechanisms are.
And help us communicate, right? I mean, one of the things, there's gonna be construction that is annoying to all of us. But I think reminding everyone that we're doing this for a really good reason. I know that when I like send off campus emails, like it either goes to the junk or people delete it. And so, you know, I think it's having folks who care about this that are talking about it and saying, I know that this is annoying, but it's gonna last for a few months in this location and it's gonna help us get to a much better place, so.
And come up with witty things to put on the next generation of yard signs.
Yeah. Rosi
Yeah.
loves what he said.
I love them too. Really, I think we should have a big banner on our Dartmouth webpage that's like, yes to the construction, right? Like, yeah, it's a bummer.
With Laura's email, they're like, with comments.
Yeah, with Laura walking around campus and all this construction.
Yes, I'll transition to the skip workshop.
Yeah.
Gonna take your.
Happy to, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for. Thank you all for being here and for your thoughtful questions. We're gonna take about a 2-minute stretch break and please get more samosas, there are plenty. And then we're gonna turn it over to Laura, who's gonna dive a bit deeper into what we've learned so far with the application initiative process. So, yeah, see you back in just a few.